welcome to the Amateur of Life and Death podcast. I'm Laura East. Each episode takes a look at a different aspect of the wonderful world of amateur theatre and features an amateur theatre maker talking about their theatrical life, theatrical loves, and the times when they've died on stage. This month's episode focuses on the upcoming production of the play Love from a Stranger by Agatha Christie and Frank Vosper, a psychological thriller which the Crescent Theatre Birmingham are performing in April 2024 as part of the Crescent Centenary season. I'll be speaking to Andrew Crocker, the production assistant for the show, and a long-serving member of the Crescent Theatre. Luke Plimmer is this month's Backstage Pass holder, and he'll be talking to set designer Poppy Chalmers, who will explain more about creating 1930s Britain inside the black box venue that is the Ron Barber Studio space. Let's hear now from Andrew. Joining me this month is Andrew Crocker, long-standing member of the Crescent Theatre Birmingham and a prolific production assistant who has also been busy over the years in other parts of amateur theatre, including props, acting, set building, flying and stage management. Andrew, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
At the moment, Andrew, you're the production assistant, or PA, for the Crescent's upcoming production of the play Love from a Stranger by Agatha Christie and Frank Vosper, which the Agatha Christie website describes as an intense and chilling psychological thriller. Can you tell us a bit about the play?
Well, as an Agatha Christie, it's full of twists and turns with loads of red herrings here and there. It's set in 1935, and I don't want to give away too much about the plot, and certainly not what happens. Indeed, I've been warned by the director, Rod Nakekill, about doing so. And suffice to say, it's very mannered, but it's about a young engaged woman whose circumstances change, leading to some surprising consequences. It's based on the Christie novel Philomel Cottage, which was written in 1934 and was adapted into the play Love from a Stranger by Frank Vosper in 1936.
You're a very experienced production assistant here at the Crescent, with over 30 credits to your name in the last 33 years for being a production assistant alone, which is very impressive. Can you tell us how you got started as a production assistant in amateur theatre and the sorts of things you do or have done in the role?
Yes, of course. I joined the Crescent in July 1991, so the 91-92 season was probably my first full year at the theatre, and I was keen to get involved as soon as I could. But I didn't actually do my first PAing on a show until about 1996. I was clearly too busy being in Christmas shows and stage managing or whatever other backstage stuff involved. And then I PA'd Educating Rita. And as far as the PA's role is concerned, you are the assistant to the production. You're not the director's assistant, so it doesn't involve taking his dry cleaning to the shop or anything like that. Your role is to act as a liaison between the sections, and then you keep a copy of the script into which you note down all the moves during rehearsal, and you become a point of contact for the director and the actors who they can refer back to if they need to, should they forget where they are at any point during their rehearsal. And then once they start to learn their lines, you become a prompt, and that's when it becomes far more interesting for the PA, because you're not constantly writing things down. You're actually taking more of an active part in the rehearsal process. Early on, I was still learning, and so was fairly content to sit back and get on with it. But as I've become more experienced, one starts to understand more about what each process is hoping to achieve, and how you might start to spot things yourself. You learn to read how directors work fairly quickly. Some like total autonomy, whilst others are fairly open to a fairly collaborative approach. I mean, one has to be fairly careful not to go too far one way or the other. My favourite part of PAing is probably the later rehearsal process, when actors are all but familiar with their lines, but may need the occasional prompt, and I can see the play start to crackle. And get an impression of what it's going to look like when it actually reaches the stage in front of an audience.
So you're enjoying watching that taking place?
Absolutely, yes.
Do you ever find yourself filling in when actors are missing?
When actors have been away. When I was PAing Handbagged, for example, we had the two actors who were playing the Queen and Margaret Thatcher away, and I found myself reading in for the Queen and Margaret Thatcher for quite a long time whilst they were in America, and found myself doing the accent as well at times, which was quite interesting.
So you get a little bit of time interacting with the actors as well that way.
Indeed, absolutely.
And you enjoy that as well?
Yes, very much so.
What's the process of becoming a production assistant for each new show? Do you choose the plays, or is it based on demand, or a bit of both?
Bit of both. I always listen very carefully when the new season is announced for any plays that would be of particular interest to me. I really like a director who's done plenty of research about the play and has a clear vision of what they're looking for to achieve from their cast.
So you find you end up working with the same director several times?
Yes, indeed, yeah.
So can you tell us about how the role of the PA has been in this show, Love from a Stranger? So,
Yes,
does it
of course.
vary significantly from show to show? Is that part of the fun, actually?
I love the detail that Rod has brought to this production. He's almost forensic in his analysis of it. And as always at the Crescent, I love having a wonderful cast to work with, and also having the great Michael Barry involved, not only as a cast member, but also as voice coach for the RP accents, is absolutely fantastic. In fact, Michael was in the very first show I was in back in 1991, which was War and Peace, which we performed at Warwick Castle.
So as part of, that was one of our tours?
That was indeed one of the touring shows, yeah. We all travelled by coach.
What are you enjoying about rehearsing the play?
One thing that I found on this most recent play, Love from a Stranger, is I've had a chance to do a fair bit of research about the play, and that's given me a really clear vision of what we've been looking to achieve, both from the director's point of view and from the point of view of the cast.
So is that in terms of the period or the background of the play?
The period, the music.
So is it he will set you something very specific to go off and research?
Exactly, yes. But I have found that immense fun.
So what sorts of things have you found out?
I had to research the top music hits of the 1930s.
It's from 1936. It's set around...
We're setting it specifically in 1935. Okay. And I also had to research for a number of things that you might not know about Agatha Christie for programme notes.
Okay. So after combing through the Crescent's online archives for the last 100 years, I can see you've been PA for at least one Agatha Christie here before, yes, which was 2018's And Then There Were None, which was magnificent. So what are some of the challenges, or joys, in fact, of producing an Agatha Christie mystery, particularly as an amateur theatre?
Well, the challenges are always making it real for the audience. The clipped RP accents can sound highly affected, but that was how people spoke back then, believe it or not. And to that end, I find it a joy invoking the spirit and suspense of the period. And I recall working on And Then There Were None. It was on the main stage, by the way, as opposed to the studio where we're having Love from a Stranger. As part of the plot, as each character was bumped off, one of the 10 figures sitting on the mantelpiece has to fall off onto the floor. This is where Colin Judges, the set designer, came into his own by designing a system whereby each one could be pushed off then behind the set on cue, obviously out of view of the audience. I think Agatha Christie remains popular because there's so much for the audience to think about, and being so well written, she introduces so many red herrings for them to latch onto. Some people get fixated onto them, asking questions like, I'm sure it was him, or how did he not see that coming?
So as well as many production assistant credits, you've also done some acting at the Crescent, which I think you mentioned in shows such as Dad's Army. There's the Browning version by Terence Rattigan and Still Life by Noel Coward. And you've also had some experience in the backstage crew, including sets for the wonderfully named When Did You Last See Your Trousers? And one of your earlier credits lists you as the cricket coach in Outside Edge by Richard Harris. So for you, what's different about being on stage or backstage, and which do you prefer?
Well, I'd have to say that I prefer being backstage because, well, from a very basic point of view, you don't have to learn any lines if you're backstage. That said, you do end up being the first point of call for many people who are on stage if they want anything. It can be a lot of hard work being backstage, and you often go unheralded. a lot of people think the theatre is all about the people who are on stage, and they forget that there's a whole team of people behind the scenes as well. But that doesn't really bother me, to be honest. That's really what theatre is all about.
So, Andrew, tell us about your first love.
My first love for theatre came at school. I was part of the stage crew, which directly led me to joining the Crescent back in 1991. The man who ran the stage crew was a teacher called Nigel August, who was a member of the Crescent, and he simply invited me to come and join, which I did immediately after my A-levels.
Was that for War and Peace?
I just happened to get the part in War and Peace because after my A-levels were over, I had nothing to do, so was hanging around the theatre, having joined. And they were rehearsing War and Peace on a lawn area that we had outside the old theatre. And the actor who had been cast in the part of Alexander I, Emperor of all the Russias, was not turning up to rehearsals. And so Ron Barber, who was directing the show, asked me if I would fill in and take the part. So that was a bit of serendipity, really.
Yes, super. What's been the love of your theatrical life?
That would probably be Glengarry Glen Ross, which was the first David Mamet play that I PA'd. We had a fabulous ensemble cast full of great Crescent names, and we rehearsed it so well, it became incredibly slick. It's a fast-moving American selling-based drama. I'm very proud of it, and it certainly could have graced a professional stage by the time it was up and running. It was a Mark Thompson production.
As the director?
Yes, and had the likes of Andrew Carey, Jeff Poole, Bob Carradine, Patrick Bentley.
And so some of those names are still very active actors and directors now, and in fact other sections of the theatre as well. So when we say sections, of course, we're talking about sound and lighting and production assistants and props and costume and all of that. Is stage management in its own right?
Yes, it is.
So all of those different sections. So yeah, still some very active members in there, and some very fine actors. I've observed from our look through the archives, I think David Mamet is the author you've done repeatedly the most often.
Is it really?
Yes, I think 6 separate productions of David Mamet plays, because you've only, with all the credits to your name as both a production assistant and assistant stage manager, actor, set and all those things, you've only repeated one production, which is quite a feat, which is Season's Greetings by Alan Ayckbourn, and that's possibly just law of averages, because we've done that one, I want to say 3 times now. But so are you particularly drawn to the more modern plays like Mamet?
Yes.
Why is that?
I just find them more interesting and more relevant to the modern world, perhaps because they are modern. That's not to say that Shakespeare can't be relevant, but I just find some Shakespeare can be a bit boring. I mean, we do some fabulous Shakespeare, and I've seen some fabulous Shakespeare both here and at other theatres, but sometimes it's a bit meh.
Yes. And you did say Glengarry Glen Ross in particular, it was very, it was like very pacey and...
Very pacey, very biting, incisive. It really had a message about capitalism. It's one of Mamet's famous plays. There's a very good film of it with Alec Baldwin, worth checking out, people.
Tell us about the one that got away.
That would be Educating Rita. I mentioned earlier that the first show that I PA'd at the theatre was Educating Rita. Now that was in the old theatre on Cumberland Street. Earlier in this season, we reprised, or not reprised, but did a new production of Educating Rita. And I would have loved to have got involved in that in some capacity, either going as far as directing it as my first go at direction, or even being the PA on the show, but that wasn't to be. never mind, it was turned out to be a fabulous production, and Fiona did an amazing job.
So that was Fiona Cotton directed our most recent version of that, and I think she'd also starred as Rita in...
Not the one I was involved with, the one in between, which was in this theatre. She played Rita in that one, yes.
So what is it about educating Rita that appealed to you as much as it did?
I love the education base, the working class, the contrast of the two characters, the working class girl seeking to make good in the cloistered halls of academia. But when you stand back, in many ways, she's as intelligent as Frank in the real world, and she teaches him as much as he teaches her. And it's a play of contrasts, but it's also a play of a journey for both characters. And I love plays like that, where there are characters who start at one point and finish at another point, but within that journey they influence other characters.
And had you had particularly fond memories and things you'd learnt from when you did?
Oh yes, very much so, particularly because it was the first show that I'd PA'd, so I'd learnt so much on that show.
Tell us about a time when you died on stage.
Well, that wasn't actually my fault. However, I was stage managing a play with the name The Woman Who Cooked Her Husband. And on one night of the performance, the cast of 3 incorrectly changed the representative set, and that threw them completely. There were blocks on the stage which were representing either chairs or a table, and they jumped from the first to the second half. Then it was only after a couple of minutes of frantic page turning backstage, or both myself as stage manager and the PA wondering where on earth they actually were, did the cast on stage work out what they'd done and somehow managed to jump back to before where they'd skipped, do all that section again, this time fortunately not skip, and keep going with an incorrect set up to the interval, then stop and carry on through to the end. Fortunately, it was such an odd play, I hope none of the audience noticed.
It's just a bit surreal, so they're like, OK, this is a choice, but I'll follow this bit again.
Yes, indeed.
So, and there's nothing you can do as the stage manager in that situation to intervene? Short
of the stage manager walking out onto the apron and with his hands in the air going, right, we're going to stop there, which you would only ever do if there's some kind of major incident, like a fatality or a fire or a gas attack or something.
You mentioned the production assistant as well, so would they have been serving as the prompt potentially in that situation?
We don't have them these days, but back then we did have a prompt, yes.
Because yes, as you mentioned, we don't have them now, so there is no one side stage that can sort of yell from the wings to find you the right line, but yes, that might have been an option.
Yeah, but that would have been difficult for them because they were so far off-piste at that point. The PA couldn't exactly have shouted, "You're in the wrong place."
I've got some quick-fire questions for you
okay.
Now, Andrew. You just have to answer one or the other, but if I find your answers particularly intriguing, then I might ask you a little bit more. So, on stage or backstage?
Backstage.
Studio or main stage?
Studio.
Acting or directing?
Directing.
Lighting or sound?
Sound.
Now, I happen to know a little bit about this, because, spoilers, I've spoken to you a little bit about this before, but why lighting or sound?
Well,
why sound?
I thought about this one as well. And although I have some experience of doing lighting dating back to school, it's really due to the work that I've done on the current production, where I've had to go back and research the sound needed for the show, that has led me to acquire something of an interest in the section.
So sorts of the hits from the 30s
exactly,
and that sort of thing. So do you think you give sound design a go in the future?
Well, possibly. I wouldn't be quite so keen on the operating side, to be frank. And I'm not sure that I have the dexterity required for setting things up. But the research side is...
That is one of the things with the sound section, for example, is that you can you can design everything and then you can have a different operator come in and do everything. So that I could possibly a future credit of yours to look out for. Rehearsal or performance?
Rehearsal.
Why is that?
As someone who is predominantly a PA, the PA is involved far more during the rehearsal than the performance. Once the show gets to performance, in many respects, your job is done.
In terms of the show itself, do you, as a PA, do you still get to enjoy going to watch it?
Oh, yes. Although I always try to make sure I'm at least in the building most nights. I will endeavour to get at least one night free during the run so that I can experience it as an audience member, because it's very different seeing the show from the audience without the confines of having to look up and down from a script. And you get to enjoy what it is you've been working on for the past few months and hope that what you've been doing has actually been successful.
And do you find you're able to separate yourself as a member of the audience, so you're not watching it going, oh, I see, I know they're doing that?
Usually, yes. There are occasions where you think, oh, well, if only we'd done it that way. Yeah.
Tech or dress?
Dress.
Sing or dance?
Dance.
Are you a fan of musicals, out of interest?
I like watching musicals. I've never been involved in a musical.
Hair or makeup?
Makeup.
Modern or period?
Modern.
Comedy or tragedy?
Comedy.
Set or props?
Set.
Finally, Shakespeare or Sondheim?
Sondheim.
Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
Not at all.
And all the very best for the upcoming show.
Thank you.
Here at Amateur of Life and Death, we love to celebrate amateur theatre. That is, theatre made by the people who do it for the love of theatre. The prolific playwright and mystery crime novelist Agatha Christie was a great lover of theatre, acting in amateur plays when she was younger, and she said in her autobiography that one of the great joys in life was the local theatre. We were all lovers of the theatre in my family. She wrote over 20 plays for the stage in over 40 years, including the record-breaking The Mousetrap, which has been running continuously in London's West End since 1952. Love from a Stranger is only the second earliest of Agatha Christie's published plays for the stage, first published in 1936, after her 1930 play Black Coffee, featuring her famous and popular detective Hercule Poirot. Her thrilling plays remain popular with amateur and professional theatres and audiences alike, just as her novels remain bestsellers around the world and continue to be adapted for television, film and the stage. It seems people just love a good mystery. Looking back through the Crescent's archives, this will be the 6th Agatha Christie play we've performed in our 100-year history, all of them in the 21st century, starting with her 1951 play, The Hollow, which we performed in 2003 in a 2-week run in December. This Christmas time slot must have been popular, as we had another 2-week run in December of the following year, this time her 1944 mystery, Murder on the Nile. Most recently, in 2018, we performed And Then There Were None, which Agatha Christie based on her own novel, which is so popular it is the world's best-selling mystery. What's it like working with such classic and popular plays, and how do you evoke the instantly recognisable 1930s of Britain? Luke speaks to the play's set designer, Poppy Chalmers, to find out more.
So we are now delighted to welcome Poppy onto the podcast. Poppy, thank you so much for coming on today. It's lovely to see you.
No worries.
So at the moment, you're the set designer for the Crescent's upcoming production of the play Love from a Stranger by Agatha Christie and Frank Vosper, which the Agatha Christie website itself describes as an intense and chilling psychological thriller. So can you tell us a bit about the play?
Yeah, of course. So I think this play is it's actually quite an easy one to explain, because I think when you say Agatha Christie, I think everyone has quite a good idea about what that means, which is really nice. Yeah. And this definitely is, in a lot of ways, very, very classic Agatha Christie. Although it's quite interesting, actually, because although it is very classic Agatha Christie, and it is based on an Agatha Christie short story called Philomel Cottage, Love from a Stranger actually wasn't written by her, but it was written by someone called Frank Vosper, who was an actor who worked a lot with Agatha Christie. And so he wrote Love from a Stranger based on both Philomel Cottage, the original short story by Agatha Christie, and also a play script by Agatha Christie called The Stranger. So all three versions are a little bit different, but keep the same feel and the same sort of general story. Some details and characters changed a bit for the different mediums, but yes, it's quite interesting.
You seem very well informed. So is this a play that you've known about before?
No, actually, I didn't know. I was reasonably familiar with some Agatha Christie's, but I didn't actually know about this one before it was announced in the season. But I was really intrigued by it. I thought, I'm a big fan of anything mystery, anything fun. I think Agatha Christie just is fun. I think so. When I saw it, I was quite intrigued. I had a little bit of a look into it, and yeah, I think it's just a good one. Caught my eye.
Because you're designing the set for this place, have you had much experience with set design in the past? Is this like a first show? Have you done this kind of thing before? Like, what's your experience?
So in terms of set design, I'm actually quite new to it. So this is my first first set design, really, actually, which has been really, really fun. So in terms of my experience coming to this point, it actually started, I think, last year or the year before, when I came to a talk that Colin Judges, one of our sort of senior designers at the Crescent, put on, which was about the history of set design, the history of theatre design, and then a bit about the process of designing at the Crescent, and some of what goes into design, what it involves, and I just really liked the sound of that, so I went along to the talk. Absolutely loved it. I was so intrigued and really wanted to get involved, and luckily at that time Colin was directing A Taste of Honey, which I think we did in February 2023.
I think that was it.
I think. And so I got involved with that and helped a bit with the set construction and painting, and sort of started to get involved in the set through that side, which I absolutely loved. It was just really, really fun. So that was sort of my introduction to set, really. And then from there, I then later worked on Mine Out with Reg, which was directed by Rod Natkiel. We did in July 2023. And I originally joined that doing props, and during the course of the show was given the opportunity to help a bit with sort of assisting with some of the design elements. So sort of assistant designed on that, and again really, really loved it. I think it's props and set, I think, go quite well hand in hand, because both of them really involve getting an understanding of the play and the characters, and helping to support the vision and the characters, and sort of express the play visually. So I really enjoyed that, and then the sort of continuation from that was then getting the opportunity to do my first design for this show.
I was saying, you said that was, I was going to say, because my next question was about like the process that that you might have to go through to get to that point. So did it just naturally just build up to that point then? Yeah,
I'd say it was a pretty natural progression, I think, from hearing a talk about it to helping with construction and painting, and then thinking, oh, okay, well, this part of it is really fun. What about the actual design part of it? And the creation that comes with that. And then, as you say, that naturally progressed onto assistant designing, and then again, so a pretty natural progression to. I was
going to say, because there might be some people listening who might be interested in getting into that kind of thing as well. So was there because obviously you mentioned that you helped the set for My Night with Reg, which Rod directed, and he's also directing Love from a Stranger. So did you become the set designer for Love from a Stranger because you've worked with Rod before, or did you put your name forward for it, or did you have to choose a certain, like, how did it happen for this specific play?
So for this specific play, it was, I think, a little bit of a case of really enjoying the process I'd had before, and so then I have really enjoyed working with Rod. Previously, I've worked with him on a couple of productions now, and have really enjoyed it, and really found really helpful the sort of the knowledge and support that I've had from him on the shows I've worked with before as well. So when I initially was also interested in working on Love from a Stranger props wise, which I'm also doing as well. So I already had the idea of wanting to be involved in it, and so then just getting a chance to work on a play that I thought sounded really interesting, and was already going to be involved in props, then just being offered the opportunity to design it as well. Just sort of jumped on it really. So a bit of a lucky opportunity.
Sure.
And I think for me as well, another reason I particularly wanted to do this one, the process of coming to this show, is coming from working on My Night with Reg, which was very much set in the 80s, which is a decade that I personally love. I'm quite familiar with aesthetically, and it was definitely a challenge, but it was in a way a more comfortable challenge because I already had quite a good idea of the sort of general trends and looks, and it's something that I really enjoy and love. So then after doing that, I was really intrigued by the idea of getting to do something that was in a completely different time period. Love from a Stranger is set very firmly in the 1930s, so we're setting this production in 1935, solidly in the middle of the decade, and very much leaning into that time period and the aesthetics of that. And so I was really excited by the idea of, now that I've done something sort of 1980s I'm a bit more familiar with, doing something in a completely different decade, but that is one that is also, I think, a really, really interesting and fun decade in terms of design and aesthetic. And
because you're mentioning design and aesthetic, because obviously the play itself, as I mentioned earlier, it's described as an intense and chilling psychological thriller. So has that influenced any decisions in particular about how you might have approached the set? Obviously spoiler free.
Of course. So yes, I think the categorizing it as a sort of intense psychological thriller probably didn't have to do as much with it as the particular subgenre of an Agatha Christie.
Sure.
So I think that Agatha Christie in itself is kind of its own subgenre.
Sure.
And I think I was a lot particularly inspired by that when it came to looking at the set. And I think you tend to get a set of not expectations exactly, but as I mentioned earlier, obviously everyone's got their idea of an Agatha Christie and what that looks like and what that feels like, and I think it's something that is really fun to lean into.
Sure.
And I think we are definitely leaning into a lot of the things that make it feel very classically like a Christie, and so that is what I think particularly influenced the design, is how can I support this particular subgenre and the way that we're approaching it, and sort of evoking that atmosphere of something that is in quite a naturalistic set, and really evoking that time period and that feel.
If you could choose one bit of this set that you liked the most, which part of this set is your personal favourite? Something maybe we can keep an eye open for.
Interesting. I think one of the things I've really enjoyed about this set, and probably my favourite aspect of it, without going into too much detail, is that there are multiple locations, so 2 locations for the play, and so finding ways to try and surprise the audience with how those 2 locations are done, and sort of how they look and appear and feel, and trying to really lean into ways to make each set feel distinct.
Sure.
And particularly because the 2 locations we have are both so both set in England in the 1930s, but one set in London and one sort of set in a remote rural country cottage.
So they're both inside?
Both inside, yeah. So both inside, but quite different in terms of the ways that they would sort of look and feel, despite being both in the same time period and the same country. So I think that's something that I've found really fun, and my favourite aspect of working on it is figuring out ways to create those 2 spaces and have them sort of change really harmoniously, and hopefully in a way that's a bit fun and a bit of a surprise. I'd like to think that that people will feel like excited and surprised when they see sort of the show and the set and how it all looks and transforms.
What is it specifically about set designing that inspires you or draws you to the role?
So I've always really, really loved sets, and was very, very lucky growing up to get to see a lot of live theatre, and it's always been something that's been my absolute favourite. I mean, one of my, I think, most formative memories as a child was going to see a production of Cats, which I know I think is a bit of a controversial one, but is as growing up as a child was my absolute favourite. I mean, I think I wore out my tape of the I think 1998 Pro Shot, which just would watch over and over again as a child, and have been really lucky to see it a lot on stage. And I remember the first time going to see it and having the curtain go up and seeing all of these. It's set in
Cats.
Yeah, cats, but cats specifically in a dump in a landfill essentially.
Sure.
And so you've got all of these things like Marmite jars and tires and a car, just random pieces of junk that have been thrown in this landfill. But obviously because they're cats and they're small, all of the pieces are giant. And I found it so fun. I really, really loved it, and I think just seeing that first initial impression when the curtain goes up is just magical. I think there's something so unique about theatre as a medium, and about the kind of creative problem solving that has to go into set design, because obviously a script, you can write anything in a script, you can put a billion locations, you can say, right, it goes from this scene to immediately this scene that's completely different, and obviously that's not something that you have constraints on in a theatre. You're generally in one static location in a theatre, in an auditorium, and so there's a lot of creativity and a lot of problem solving that has to go into, okay, how do you take this this world and this scene in this period and everything and this setting and turn it into something practical that actually can be done on stage live in front of an audience. And I just think that's amazing. It creates so much opportunity for creativity and for innovation in how you might do something, in that sense of wonder and surprise. I think that's just something that is so unique to theatre and so magical about theatre. So sets absolutely have always been something that I've really loved, and I particularly am very driven by novelty and trying new things and doing new things, and I think set really gives you an amazing opportunity to do that, because all shows are so different. The way that even the same show could be approached so many different ways, and the set is such a huge part of creating and contributing to that vision and that sort of style.
If you could take that enthusiasm and passion that you have, and somebody came up to you and said you can design a set for any show, which show would you design for?
This is a really good question, a really tricky question actually. I think there's not so much a specific show that I would design for, but I think I'm really intrigued by, now that I've worked, the shows I've worked on and been involved in have been tend to be more sort of naturalistic sets, and so I would be really excited and intrigued by the idea of going completely the other direction and designing something that's more sort of abstract, and more open to interpretation, and sort of thinking about how you can really distill the representation of something into quite an abstract set. So I think I'd be really intrigued by that. I'm a massive fan of the horror genre, and I think that particularly lends itself so well to stage. So I think it might be something, if I was going to do anything
in the next season.
I know that's very true, very intriguing. So yeah, I think anything spooky, I'd love to have a go at designing that. Anything that is very atmospheric and that could perhaps be more abstract and sort of representative, I'd really love to have a go at that.
See, myself, I don't think I have many good skills in terms of the art side of things, and I think that's something that personally would make me hesitant to want to explore the sort of set design side of things. And there might be some people listening who might have an interest in that but might not feel confident or might not be sure. Is there any advice you can offer anybody listening?
Absolutely. So I would say I completely know how you feel. I think if you'd asked me 1 year ago if I would want to design a show, I think I would have said no, not because of lack of interest, but because the idea just seems so terrifying.
Sure.
And I think particularly if you're new to it, it's really hard to imagine if you don't know, if you feel like you don't know exactly what you're doing, it can be really scary and feel like, okay, well, the Crescent has such a reputation for amazing sets, you know, and it does, and we always do have such brilliant sets, and I think that is something that we are really, really good at. And so it's very easy to feel like, okay, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to design for something. I don't, you know, I'm worried that that I won't be able to do it, that it'll look bad, that will, you know, sort of let down the reputation of the Crescent, which are all things that I worried about before getting involved in design. But I think the brilliant thing about the Crescent is the fact that we have such, I think, a high reputation, so many incredibly skilled people, means that you know, no one is going to let you fail.
Sure.
There is so much support and so much will to get more people interested in design, and there are so many aspects of design that even if you are worried about not having a strength in a particular area, there are people that will help guide you through that. And one thing that I found really, really helpful on this set is because I'm still so new to it, when I came to design the set, I had no idea about the exactly what was involved and sort of the considerations that I had to think about. You know, even stuff like sight lines, or whether this is something that is physically possible to do. So can I put something in a design if I don't know how we might actually realise it? And I've been really, really lucky to have a lot of support, as well as Rod Natkiel, the director, from Keith Harris as well, who's another one of our senior designers. And being able, the process for this set involved sort of me putting together my initial design and working with Rod to make sure that, you know, it worked with sort of his vision for things, and then taking that to Keith, and Keith was so incredibly helpful in terms of taking my designs and helping to sort of answer some of those questions and help with some of those the considerations and worries, and turn it into a design that actually could practically work. So I'd say if you're worried about not knowing exactly how to answer every question at every stage of the process, don't worry about that. There are so many people that are sort of willing to help and are really invested in getting more people into design. And I think there are so many aspects to it that if you have any interest at all in any aspect of designing, it's really worth trying. And the other thing that I would also say that's a really, really great way to get involved in it is to start by, if you're not ready to sort of jump into the design side of it, to have a go at some set painting or construction and helping out with other sets that have already been designed, because that's sort of where I started with The Taste of Honey. And I think just having that element of starting to get a little bit familiar with the workshop and the actual construction and painting side then helped me feel a lot more confident about understanding a bit of what goes into that set design, which then helped to inform the design itself when I actually came to the design side of things. And obviously at the moment we've got a really, really great opportunity for that, because obviously with our next show after Love from a Stranger, we've got Gypsy coming up, which has an absolutely huge set, and so if anyone is interested in sort of getting involved in design, and you know, there is an opportunity there to get involved and help with the painting and construction of that. And I would really, really encourage anyone who has even thought about a passing interest in design to maybe get involved with that. I know there's lots of opportunities coming up for helping with that set, so brilliant. I would say get involved in that.
So we're going to go on to the quick fire questions now. So, on stage or backstage?
Backstage.
Studio or main stage?
Studio.
Act or direct?
Direct.
Lighting or sound?
Lighting.
Rehearsal or performance?
Performance.
Tech or dress?
Dress.
Sing or dance?
Sing.
Hair or makeup?
Hair.
Modern or period?
Modern.
Comedy or tragedy?
Comedy.
Set or props? Oh yeah, this is a biased question.
No, this is
This is tricky. Choose between your children, apparently.
I think I'm I'm here to talk about set. I think I'm going to have to say set.
That's Shakespeare or Sondheim?
I think the only question that it was harder than set or props is Shakespeare or Sondheim. I think I'm going to have to go Sondheim, but it is very close.
Sure. Now, you said you prefer lighting to sound. So does lighting ever impact set at all? Or, I mean, I'm sure it has a...
Definitely. I mean, I think lighting and set work so much together. You know, the way in which a set is lit can completely transform it, and both things. I mean, sound as well. I mean, certainly all of it is really important in sort of creating the full show and the full production itself. But I think lighting, there's something really exciting about how much a set can be transformed by lighting choices. And you often have, obviously, you've got just the way that set and lighting work together so well hand in hand. I think I've got quite an interest in potentially getting involved with lighting next.
Thank you so much for coming onto the podcast, Poppy. It's been really interesting to hear about, and we look forward to seeing the set, possibly with giant Marmite jars, in action for Love from a Stranger very, very soon. Thank you very much.
Love from a Stranger is on from the 13th to the 20th of April in the Ron Barber Studio at the Crescent Theatre Birmingham. Thank you for listening to the Amateur of Life and Death podcast. If you'd like to listen to more, make sure you subscribe at podcast.crescent-theatre.co.uk or via Spotify or Apple Podcasts to get the next episode. You can find out more about the Crescent Theatre Birmingham and our upcoming productions, including Love from a Stranger, by visiting www.crescent-theatre.co.uk or by following us on social media. Amateur of Life and Death is a Crescent Theatre production. This episode was presented and researched by Laura East and Luke Plimmer. The music is by Brendan Stanley, and the podcast is edited by Laura East and Kevin Middleton.